Mario Andretti is an Italian-American racing driver well known worldwide for his achievements in sprint cars, Indy cars, stock cars, sports cars, and of course Formula 1. When I covered his final Grand Prix recently in an episode of Random F1 Race Reviews, I described him as a legend, and this gave me the idea to compile a list of his greatest achievements to show exactly why he deserves this legendary status. When the Andretti family emigrated to the USA from a part of Italy that is now Croatia, they had just $125 between them. Mario falsified his driver's license and lied about his age so he could enter an amateur dirt oval race in a 1948 Hudson, which I would not advise trying yourself. Mario and his brother Aldo took turns racing the car behind their parents' backs and won several of their early races. Mario won 21 races out of 46 in 1960 and 61 alone. For the 1965 Indianapolis 500, Mario started 4th in his Hawk Ford and ran no lower than 6th at any point in the race. He eventually finished 3rd, winning the coveted Rookie of the Year award, an impressive feat considering that the rookie group also included future 2-time Indy 500 winner Gordon Johncock, future 4-time Indy 500 winner Al Unser, 1981-82 Champ Car champion George Snyder, 2-time Champ Car champion Joe Leonard, and Le Mans winner and Formula 1 podium finisher Marcin Gregory. He then went on to win the Champ Car season despite missing the rounds at Pikes Peak and Trenton Speedway. With a record-setting time of 165.899 miles per hour 4-lap average, Mario blasted to pole position at the 1966 Indy 500, lining up alongside F1 champion Jim Clark and the previously mentioned George Snyder. He then led the first 16 laps but dropped back and retired with a broken valve. He did, however, win the Champ Car crown that year for the second time in a row, thanks to 8 wins from 14 starts. The year after, in one of his few NASCAR Grand National Series events, number 11 Mario Andretti took his Holman Moody Ford to a victory at the prestigious Daytona 500, beating 1965 winner Fred Lorenzen and superspeedway specialist James Hilton. It was the only time in history that a driver born outside of the USA has won the Daytona 500. In 1968, Mario Andretti attempted to qualify for the Italian Grand Prix in a 3rd Lotus before flying back to America to race in the Hoosier 100, where he finished 2nd. His original plan was to then fly all the way back to Italy for the Grand Prix, but a Formula 1 regulation states that a driver must not compete in a race less than 24 hours before a Grand Prix, so he was excluded and didn't return to Italy that day, unsurprisingly. However, he made up for it in dramatic fashion by taking pole position on his Grand Prix debut at Watkins Glen, out-qualifying Jackie Stewart who started 2nd, as well as Mario's world champion teammate Graham Hill. Sadly, the race didn't go quite so well for him. On the first lap he was passed by Jackie Stewart, and then his wing cracked up for no apparent reason, and he was forced to pit so his team could tape it back up. He then ran 13th for a while before retiring with a clutch issue. It was a disappointing end to a strong showing, but he had well and truly left his mark on the world of Formula 1. Famously, Andretti's have appeared to have some sort of a curse looming over them at the Brickyard, with bad fortune plaguing Mario and all of his racing relatives for most of their careers. However, this wasn't always the case, and Mario showed this by winning the 53rd running of the race back in 1969. After qualifying 2nd between previous winners AJ Foyt and Bobby Unser, Mario took the lead on lap 1. He was then repassed by Foyt, but when Foyt dropped out of contention with a split manifold, it was left down to Mario Andretti and Lloyd Ruby to fight for the win. Heading into the second half of the race, Ruby made a dramatic error as he Felipe Massa style pulled away from his pit box with the fuel hose still attached, and the subsequent hole ripped out of his tank forced him to retire. Andretti went on to lead the last 94 laps, and when he won, his gap to 2nd place was 2 minutes and 13 seconds. This was apparently despite suffering a near stall in the pits, low transmission fluid, a slipping clutch, high engine temperature, and he also knocked over his chief mechanic in his last stop. Andretti did the entire race without changing tyres, and his time of 3 hours 11 minutes and 14.71 seconds was a record time. Amazingly though, this would be Mario's only Indy 500 win, despite the fact he entered the race another 24 times, in which he took 2 second places and a pole position. Also in '69, Mario went on to win his 3rd Champ Car title, and he also won the Pikes Peak International Hill Climb. After the promise of his Grand Prix debut back in '68, Mario had entered 4 more Grand Prix, but had retired from all of them. In 1970, he was signed by STP Corporation, who he also raced for in Champ Car, to drive a customer March 701 in the races which didn't overlap with his American commitments. At the Spanish Grand Prix in April, Jackie Stewart dominated the race and won by over a lap, but another supreme performance was being put on by Mario, who finished 3rd in a Grand Prix where one of the factory March cars had actually failed to qualify. It was his first Grand Prix podium, although sadly he only raced in 3 more Grand Prix that year, and it wouldn't be until 1977 that he would enter every Grand Prix of an F1 season. In just his 10th Formula 1 start at the 1971 South African Grand Prix, Mario Andretti triumphed. He had been signed by Ferrari for the 1971 season, and despite struggling for pace in qualifying and being outqualified by his teammate Regazzoni, Andretti passed Stewart, Regazzoni and Eamon and won by 20.9 seconds. It was the first time he had ever led the World Championship, although sadly he wasn't able to race in several Grand Prix that year, and he would have to wait 5 years for his next Grand Prix triumph. Okay, I know that 4th place doesn't sound too impressive when talking about an experienced IndyCar and F1 competitor, but hear me out. You see, in 1975, Mario was driving a Parnelli VPJ4, which was a real underdog hero of a car. Designed by the man responsible for the legendary wedge shape of the Lotus 72, Maurice Philippe, the Parnelli VPJ4 was originally designed to run on Firestone tyres, but had to switch to Goodyear's after Firestone withdrew from F1. It had no factory support and pretty much no staff or mechanics. Andretti was their only driver. In its first 6 races, the Parnelli failed to score points, although got close on a few occasions. At the 1975 Swedish Grand Prix though, Mario shocked everyone by not only finishing on the lead lap, but also finishing 4th place ahead of several more fancied cars. Andretti would then go on to score points for Parnelli on 2 more occasions, at the 1975 French Grand Prix and the 1976 South African Grand Prix. Most Formula 1 fans know the story of the 1976 championship battle and how it came to a head at the final round in Fuji. The heavens opened, the race surprisingly went ahead anyway, and Niki Lauda retired a healthy car, stating that his life was more valuable than a trophy. Of course, James Hunt won the championship that day, but do you know who properly mastered the wet conditions and won the Grand Prix? Well, if you haven't figured it out already, it was Mario Andretti, who delivered his first real standout wet race performance by lapping the entire field. Admittedly, he was held by tyre problems for Depailler and Hunt, and he was actually more competitive when it was dry than when it was wet, but that doesn't take away from the fact that he negotiated the tricky circuit in treacherous conditions and crossed the line first. Designed by Colin Chapman, the Lotus 78 was a legendary car that truly pioneered ground effect, and is considered by many to be the best car of its era. Utilising this to the fullest, Mario won 4 races in 1977 on his way to 3rd in the championship, and then the first race of 1978. This was the best chance he had ever had of winning the World Drivers' Championship, and as it had been 10 years since his F1 debut, he knew he had to deliver now. By the 4th round of the season, Mario was 2nd to Reutemann in the standings, and at the 5th round he dropped to 3rd, but for round 6 at Belgium, Team Lotus pulled out their secret weapon, the Lotus 79. This brand spanking new set of wheels took the ground effect concept pioneered by the 78 and took it to another level, fully incorporating it into the design of the chassis and side skirts, and producing an immense amount of grip. Mario tested it, liked it, and immediately took it to victory at its first race. And its second race too. And its 4th. In fact, he took it to 5 wins in 11 races and wrapped up the championship 2 races early. Sadly, the celebrations were rather muted after the death of his teammate Ronnie Peterson at the Italian Grand Prix, but Mario still wholeheartedly deserved this championship. To this day, he is still the most recent American to win the Formula 1 World Championship. After Didier Pironi's career-ending crash at the 1982 German Grand Prix, Mario got the call-up to help Ferrari win the Constructors' title, so he returned to the Maranello-based team with whom he had won 11 years earlier for the final 2 rounds of the season. At Monza, he took pole, delighting the Italian crowd who saw their favourite cars line up first and third. The race didn't go quite his way, and he dropped to third, but he still managed to round off a double podium for Ferrari and his own last podium in Formula One. By 1993, Mario was an IndyCar veteran of 30 years, a ridiculously long career for any single-seater driver. However, a washed-up old man he was not. At Phoenix, he won, completing the 200-mile race in record time. He then qualified second at the Indianapolis 500 and finished 5th. Not bad for a 53-year-old man. Despite contesting Le Mans 9 times, with the earliest of these being in 1966 and the latest being all the way in 2000, Mario never won the prestigious event outright. He came third, along with his son Michael and friend Philippe Alliot in '83, but in 1995 he got his closest sniff of success when he paired up with the French trio Courage Competition, Bob Willock and Eric Ellery, to pilot their C34 Porsche. Back in those days, there wasn't really a clear number 1 class, with LMGT1, WSC and LMP2 fighting for top honours, and Mario's car was in the WSC class. Andretti took the race very seriously despite being 55 years old, and Courage was the only car in the field where all 3 drivers could lap under 4 minutes and did so in practice. The team drove a fast and consistent race, battling 2 McLaren F1 GTRs through the night, but sadly Mario lost control in the rain and the team had to pit for damage repairs. I was considering not putting this race on this list seeing as Mario damaged the car, but heck it, they were still the first car in their class, with the second place WSC entry of Kramer Racing completing 8 fewer laps.